would like to hope there isn't one. Many of you people who know about being health-conscious humans know about antioxidants. Some of you, I suppose, don't. Vitamin C is an antioxidant, and that is good. UCLA scientists found that antioxidant vitamin C can help avoid cancer, strokes, heart attacks, increase life expectancy an average of 5 years. Now, there are some new antioxidants on the market. They are 20 times the power of vitamin C. They're called pycnogenols. Now, you might ask in the first place, why do I care about antioxidants? Well, simple. You're getting bombarded with all kinds of bad stuff called free radicals. And actually, I would sum it up by saying they make you old. Stiff joints, premature wrinkling, degenerative disease like arthritis, circulatory disorders, diabetes, and heart disease. Antioxidants fight that. Something 20 times the power of vitamin C, well, I shouldn't have to say more. The brown spots on my hand are disappearing. Almost gone, actually. If you would like to try pycnogenols, call Natural Health. Please, at 1-800-856-1119. That's 1-800-856-1119. And now, coming from not very far away, actually, Henderson, Nevada, here is John Rhodes. John, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Art.
It's good to have you.
It's good to have you, too. And by the way, happy birthday. I got wind that it was your birthday on Saturday.
It was, indeed. Oh, it was a wonderful birthday, John.
Great.
Wonderful. John, I don't know where to start. Tell us a little, if you would, about yourself, I guess, first.
Okay.
Who is John Rhodes?
John Rhodes is a gentleman of about 34 years of age. When I was younger, I lived most of my life overseas. My parents were, one was a swimmer, my mother, and my father was a pilot that used to work for Air America, which was an old CIA operative.
That's right.
And I had the opportunity as a child to live a lot of different places overseas, including Vietnam when I was 6, 7, and 8, and over in the Middle East in Beirut, Lebanon. And then I came back to the United States here, of course, completed my education. And it wasn't until about 5 or 6 years ago I started getting interested in what was going on as far as the UFO field and unexplained phenomenon, because I felt that there was just something that wasn't right as far as the reality in which we were living.
Well, you heard me say, I'm sure a little while ago, I've had a lot of guest information lately from people who have been studying for some time the possibility that a civilization existed here on Earth long before we ever did, and that though there are artifacts, they are few, and most of the evidence of their existence has been erased. Does that fit in with what you believe?
That fits in. They've either purposely been erased, in my opinion, or else they've been erased due to natural geological changes, including being sunken into the earth underground. And I think most recently we started as human beings being aware of the actuality of these civilizations, not only by seeing things above the surface, such as the Great Pyramids and the unexplained pyramids of Mexico and Central America and South America, and all the beautiful pieces of architecture left behind that really we sit here in awe with, even with today's engineering skills. But when we started, I think, getting into looking underground as far as geological exploration for oil and also subsurface use of space for storage for oil fields and gasoline and food, etc., that we started finding a lot of things underground that left even more of a mystery than what we had above ground.
Again, I've got to stop you for a second, John. It's really interesting that you should be saying that, because there is a project ongoing now in Alaska called HAARP.
Right.
I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yes, I have.
And it's supposedly got a dual purpose, and one is to heat up the ionosphere to see what will happen. I'm not sure about that one. And the other purpose, supposedly, is to try and map underground tunnels and caves. And I thought, underground tunnels and caves. Now, why are we wanting to look underground? What do we think is underground that we don't know about?
Apparently, there seems to be more underground that's worth looking at than above our heads in space with the NASA program. I've read about HAARP, and I've also looked into the Shuttle Bay experiments in which they were using ground-probing radar. They said to help study the Rwandan ape because of the war in Rwanda.
Right.
And that just kind of hit me as kind of funny. And I think that because of today's technology with the ability to burrow underground with thermonuclear boring machines that have been patented in U.S. patent books by Los Alamos Laboratories, I know before you had a really great researcher on the air, Richard Sauter, and
that's right.
He's done a lot of studies on this and brought a lot of information forward to the public, declaring that the United States and other countries by now have very easily been able to penetrate the Earth with these thermonuclear boring machines that literally vitrify the rock, and what's left over is about 25% of mass. And since it's molten lava, they compress it towards the tunnel walls, and it permeates through the tunnel walls, creating a self-lined tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
This is great when you look back at a lot of the old stories of people in caves and caverns, even when you're talking about books like Etadorfa and other stories like the Smoky Gog, in which people talk about the Hollow Earth. These stories were coming out long before we were even aware of the technology about glass-lined tunnels, and that's exactly what the technology is available today, is to leave glass-lined tunnels behind. And these people were reporting them way back in the last century.
But these are tunnels, John, that we would have created, so we would therefore, for the most part, know they are there, certainly at high government levels. The implication of HAARP is that we're looking for stuff that we don't know is there.
Right. Well, if it's very simple in terms, I mean an engineering term, due to this technology to be able to burrow underground, then that leaves us a whole new issue. Not only would NORAD have to worry about missiles coming from overhead from the north, and also be able to look out for any kind of missile attack from above, now we've got a whole new issue about how do we prevent other countries or other species from burrowing under the ground into our continent, into the North American country, and coming near sensitive facilities or near sensitive government buildings.
There's an awful thought.
So, I mean...
you know, that you're right. I mean, it would have national security implications,
Absolutely.
And now I suddenly understand, even the alien question or the reptilian question aside, there would be national security reasons. Suddenly it dawned on me.
All the billions of dollars they had spent so far, now they've just figured out that they've only done 50% of their job.
Huh.
So there had to be this large launch into being able to see who and what is underground at what depth and who they are. If, as I believe, there are other alien species coexisting here on this planet with us, they want to make sure not that these species are telling them where they are, but they want to be able to make sure of being able to verify themselves exactly who is where. And also when you start looking at the fact that in 1988 they created a National Cave Resources Act, which prevents people from going into a cave.
That's right.
With a $10,000 fine and 1 year imprisonment for each entry.
That's right. And it's supposedly to protect the natural resource of the caves. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. There are some caves, absolutely, that have been defaced. But the majority of caves across the United States, most people don't want to go near a cave, because there's a certain amount of superstition and a little bit of spookiness going into a dark, hollowed-out piece of the earth.
Sure, I'm one of them. I wouldn't do it.
I had to overcome that fear due to my own research and looking around.
Oh, now, wait a minute. You mean you actually have made some trips?
Yes, I've been into cave systems and also into mines, and I can tell you one thing, that there is certainly... I had to do it because look, I'm afraid of climbing. I'm afraid of going into a cave. Yet I had to confront my fears in order to fulfill my research that I'm doing.
Right.
And believe me, in some instances I've been shaking. I mean, I used to watch people climb a mountain, and I think these guys are crazy.
Yeah, I still think that.
You see, then I'm faced with the position of having to go out and learn how to do it myself. But yes, there's been instances where I've gone into certain caves because I've heard that they are. One instance in particular was a reptilian outpost very near Las Vegas. As a matter of fact, Las Vegas has almost overrun it.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and when I went in there, a friend of mine told me that this cave had a sealed door, down a shaft. It was really an old mine. It had a steel door down a shaft after you went down a vertical pit. So I went in with my friend. In order to get in there, you had to crawl horizontally on your belly for about 20 feet before you could even stand up, because the cave ceiling was right at your back. And then I went in there. I looked for this door. It wasn't there. And then I was feeling kind of odd. I scraped my knuckles and my fingernails into the wall because it looked kind of wet. And I could feel mud go under my fingernails, and I saw like a scrape of mud. But when I retrieved backwards, I thought, well, I have to take a picture because this door isn't here, and I want to be able to show my friend who told me about this. And when I took the picture, I saw a streak of light come up. And I looked down at my hands. After I turned my flashlight back on, I looked down at my hands, and there was no mud underneath my fingernails, nor was there any mud on my hands.
Ooh,
and when I got the actual photograph developed, there was a streak of light going from the bottom left to the top right with a huge wall of light underneath it, diffused off to the right-hand side. I have a feeling, and I'm not any technical expert in this area, and it's just my opinion, but I have a feeling that there was holographs at work there. And with the flash of the camera, it was trying to adjust for that instantaneous change of light level, and it couldn't quite do it. And this is one of the recent photographs I have of anomalous activities underground.
What? By the way, I would give my eye teeth to get hold of one of those photographs, John.
Oh, I'll send you a copy.
Oh, you will?
Oh, sure.
All right. You know, I'll tell you, John, I'm right in the middle of writing a book, and I'd be glad to give you credit. So if you want to include permission to publish it, I'll stick it in there.
I don't think there will be a problem.
All right. Wonderful. I mean, I really love being able to get these photographs out. And
absolutely.
I've got a bulletin board system, by the way, where we do that. We take special photographs like the one you're talking about and make them available, so I'll do that as well. Boy, that's fascinating. I don't know if I could have overcome my fear, and I sure don't know that I could crawl through a space just barely big enough for me to crawl through. I wouldn't like that at all. Earth above, Earth below, Earth to each side. There's something about that that would be very claustrophobic.
It is a little bit of something to overcome.
Yeah.
But one thing is that I've realized through doing all the research that I have is that the old phrase from, I think it's out of the Bible that says, as above, so below, it really does encounter pretty much the question of the UFO phenomenon.
All right, what is it that you believe is down there, John?
Well, when I started thinking about the one question that really started narrowing me into my field of research which was primarily getting into the reptilian area, which is I started questioning as to why is it that the majority of contactees who meet the Nords and who meet these other wonderful beings from craft are told that they have some sort of a non-interference clause where they're not allowed to interfere with us. Yet at the same time, through that contact, there was a form of interference, but not on the scale of which the Greys, what you see now is the Greys, the 4.5 foot tall, standard Grey, which is the alien with the large black eyes and the thin extremities and the large head. Why is it that they, along with less frequent but still reports of contacts with them and the reptilian beings who have been reportedly been the ones giving them orders or commanding them, why is it that these two particular species have repeatedly been talked about in the field? What gives them the right where others do not have the right to interfere with us, even when they're talking about doing the experiments with people on craft, as they do? And that started making me look more into our own historical perspective as to what is there left, what's really left of our own history that hasn't already been hidden or just naturally lost that could explain to us the existence of these beings. Number one is, when you look at the Greys, the oldest reference I can find to anything that's like a Grey is that the Hopi Indians refer to these Greys as ant people.
Ant people.
And from our own visual perspective now, we can see why they would maybe refer to them as ant people. Say, for instance, what if this being came from underground, or you had knowledge that they lived underground? Mm-hmm. They had large eyes, as do ants, thin extremities, as do ants, large cranium, as do ants. And, of course, now we can understand that they might have just said, well, this is an ant person. you know.
Or it would be their easy reference, yes.
Exactly.
Sure.
And
you're right about the features. When you consider an ant, those similarities are quite striking. John, hold on just a second. We'll be right back to you. My guest is John Rhodes, and now I'm beginning to make a bit of the connection myself. How about you? I couldn't quite understand the human-reptilian connection, but I'm beginning to get there, I think.
First of all, I started noticing that I believe that they are a species that are off the original trunk or the tree of life, the first genetic creation that took part on this planet. And this may or may not be so, but this is, from what I've been able to gather, this is my perspective. And we are further genetic chains or genetic branches off that original trunk.
In a process, John, of evolution or creation or both? Or
I think it's both. I think originally it was divine creation, and then shortly after that there was intervention of sorts. And when I started, what really clued me in on this is starting to look at the antiquity of the serpent and serpent worship around the world. There is no animal on Earth that has been revered so highly and taken both ends of the spectrum, whether it's negative or positive, into the influence of man and his religion, than that of the serpent or the snake.
True. That's true.
You can also include in that category dragons, lizards, and any of the reptilian species, but primarily the serpent, the snake, and or the dragon.
John, are there not some religions, it strikes me back in the Appalachian Mountains particularly, Christian religions, serious thumper religions, where they use a snake as a demonstration of how they can overcome, and I hesitate to use the word evil. I don't know if evil is right, but overcome something or another, and they use them in religion.
Yeah, they dance with the snakes and they tempt them almost to fight them.
That's right, as though you cannot harm me.
Right, and
yes.
through their own faith in God, they think that once they are bitten, that they'll survive. And in fact, when many people, when they're bitten, do in fact swell up, because of the venom.
Right.
But yes, the serpent actually exemplifies both the positive and negative religious implications. We look at, first of all, the Japanese and the Chinese revere the serpent or the snake and the dragon as being something very benevolent, while at the same time we're told through our own religions that the being who stood in the Garden of Eden, and remember, it was the only reference in the Holy Bible that we could even talk to animals, was that of a reptilian. And this reptilian was smart enough to start teaching us. And when you look at the connections between the Sumerian text talking about Enlil, or E, having been a divine being from an extraterrestrial being who was involved with the genetic manipulation of man, and supposedly he lived in a place called Snake Marsh, and he was the one that had taken a branch of the mammalian man and mixed it with some of the reptilian being. And the place where he lived, of course, was Snake Marsh, like I said, but you could think of a place where snakes live as a den. And then we come back to looking at the biblical explanation in Genesis, where they talk about the reptilian being in a place called Eden and giving man knowledge.
Eden. Yes.
Right, Eden. And these types of little pieces of information are all over the place, and it's just a matter of being able to make the connections. I believe that one reason that it's really interesting to note that amongst many of the religious cultures of the world, it's a common rule or law, religious law, that they are not allowed to draw or make anything of that which is in heaven.
All right, John, we've got to pause here at the top of the hour.
Okay.
We'll be back. Relax for a few moments. Eden, that's quite a jump, huh? A little emphasis, but big meaning. We'll be right back. questions as we can. Reminding you, the east of the Rockies line is 1-800-825-50.
Photo arrive in Geneva Monday for a last-ditch effort.
Somebody who's an expert on underground. I've got a lot of questions, and I know that you've heard about this. I have a good friend, John, who built a porch here in Pahrump, Nevada, other side of the valley. He sank big beams into the ground in order to do this. After he built it, he had such a bad hum, John, that he could not sleep at night in his house. That's how bad it was. He ended up having to redo the whole thing in a different way. Something was being picked up and transmitted into his home from underground. What have you heard about this?
Well, I know that the underground hum that's been heard, like in Taos, is not limited to just the Taos area, but has actually been heard in different countries around the world as well. And it's been happening for longer than most people realize. My own idea of what it may be, we've heard the theories about using ELF and loop antennas to be able to communicate, through the water and over the atmosphere with submarines around the world.
That is correct.
I know that the Colorado Bureau of Mines patented a device that actually uses ELF to communicate through the rock. In other words, it doesn't need any cables or anything. It just uses the rock to carry the signal. And the lower the frequency, the greater the coverage area. And when you start talking about, all I perceive now as my reality is moving atoms and frequency. And all we really have to live by this time around in our lives is this mass or different combinations of frequencies combined together to create different objects and different light. And when you start talking about the Taos hum, you're talking about a frequency that's being put through the earth, but yet at the same time, there's a lot of natural crystal formations within the earth that could take certain branches of this frequency and, I guess you could say, change it or mutate it so we may have some sort of a sympathetic resonance with it.
Interesting.
Around the meninges of the brain, which is the sheath covering the blood-brain barrier, we have a high quantity of what they call magnetite crystal.
Mm-hmm.
And what this is that Dr. Kirschving, Caltech, has started looking into this, thinking that there's higher concentrations of magnetite crystal. Now, magnetite, mind you, is a naturally forming magnet ore. It's like lodestone in the earth. We don't eat it, but our body actually manufactures it. So when we have magnetite crystals surrounding our brain, that means that we as humans have everything necessary to make a transmitter or receiver, which is crystals, magnets, and energy and minerals. So if you're getting these different frequency fluctuations, I don't doubt whatsoever that we are somehow sympathetically resonating with those frequencies. As to what they could be, well, like we said before, perhaps they are some sort of a subsurface radar around these sensitive facilities looking for anything that may be coming near them.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Because a lot of these reports have actually come in from areas where previously people have said that there's some sort of anomalous activity happening with clandestine black book operations. So that's one possibility. The other is, of course, the communications. And the other one is, of course, and I've thought about it, and I don't know how true it could be, that the people who are hearing them have implants. And somehow these implants are being triggered. So these people are being able to hear a sound. Because they're not quite hearing it, but they're sensing it all over. Now, I've heard sounds like that have continued for a period of 2 or 3 weeks, like a clicking, but then that clicking has stopped. I've also found out that other people associated with the group have heard the same sound at the same time, and it all stopped at the same time.
All right, this is from Sean in Yucca Valley. Then I'm going to give out the numbers, and we're going to answer some phones. Art, I have often heard it claimed there is only a 2% difference between humans and chimpanzees' genetic material. This seems to argue against any human-reptilian melding. Would you please ask John to comment on the point? In other words, as we look at genetic connection, I think the facts are correct. there's a very close relationship to chimpanzees.
Oh, absolutely.
But genetically, not so close to reptilians.
Well, like I said, the connection is definitely there to reptilians. I'm not saying the primary connection or the most evidentiary one is, or the most dominant connection is. I do believe, like the caller had called in or faxed in, that yes, there is a high degree of connection with regular mammals like the primitive apes. However, it appears to be that the most dormant form of a connection that we have, coming from the archaic part of the brain, is that of a reptilian. So, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first, the monkey or the reptile? So, when you're talking about, I guess you could say, Paul MacLean says that he's been able to excise like laboratory rats parts of their brain, or laboratory animals parts of their R complex. And what he's realized is that R complex dominates our behavior patterns as far as hierarchy, territoriality, ritualism, and aggressive behavior. And this is how he was able to find that out. So when we're talking about like who are we, it makes more sense to me that there's some sort of an important connection there with the reptilians, because I haven't heard too many stories of abductions by monkeys.
That's a good point.
Where I have heard the abductions by reptilians.
All right, John, let me quickly give out the numbers, and we'll take some calls. Fascinating topic. Gee. First-time caller line, area code 702-727-1222. The wild card line, several of those available. Area code 702-727-1295. Toll free west of the Rockies, it's 1-800-618-8255. East of the Rockies, it's 1-800-825-5033. Just one other quick thing, John, then we'll pick up some calls. The natural magnetic material that you say surrounds our brain.
Right.
Wouldn't that, they're doing a lot of studies now about electromagnetic fields and how they affect us. And when I say that, I mean even radio, television, and microwave transmission. Would this be, do you see a connection, in other words? If we are receptors, then it seems to me that sort of energy might be received and or might be affecting us. Right.
Well, there's so many forms of energy that we're aware of, but I believe that there are so many forms of more subtle energies that we're not aware of, and I think we catch the full spectrum. Yeah, I think it's very unhealthy to live around power lines. As a matter of fact, they say that when people go into caves or cave systems or underground, there's a natural insulation there provided for them, so they're no longer walking on the surface as just regular human antennas.
That would be true.
You just have to stick up a good antenna, and you can figure out that, my God, there's thousands of frequencies shooting straight through us all the time. Thousands.
Yes, well, they're also doing a lot of work on intense magnetic fields, and I hate to admit this, I'm a ham operator.
Right.
And I've been doing so since I've been about 12 years old, so I've been getting exposed to close-in, large electromagnetic fields, RF, all my life. And frankly, and I'm sorry to have to report it, but they've done a lot of reports indicating that amateur radio operators and people exposed to a lot of RF do tend to have a higher cancer rate. So there may be something to all this.
But then again, just to comfort you, I know that the mind is so much more powerful than we've ever been allowed to previously conceive that it is or believe that it is.
Well, thanks for the comfort, John. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Rhodes. Hi.
Hi.
Where are you?
I'm calling from Oklahoma City.
Okay.
I've been listening to your show, and I just caught in on the latter part of your show this evening. But one of the things I had in question when we were talking about reptilian is I have a large amount of paperwork and work that's been gathered for the past 10 years from a friend of mine who believes she's an alien or a part alien. And she's given me her work, and it has hundreds of drawings and cryptic writings. And I'd like to know whom I can get in touch with to show this work to.
Well, cryptic writings, aliens, does it seem to relate to some sort of reptilian connection?
To some degree, in some parts of her notes it does.
It does.
I've went and bought a particular book on cryptic writings from past centuries, trying to decipher some of the information.
All right. Listen on the air. John, it's a good opportunity. If somebody like that or anybody else wants to get hold of you, or maybe have you written a book, John?
Well, no, the book's in the works. I've just made a recent... we'll get into it a little bit more if you want. But
all right, then let me try this avenue. If they want to get hold of you and get you information...
Okay, this is what you do. First of all, if it's something that you're really, really frightened of somebody interfering or intercepting, the way to do this is to take it and fully register it and heavily insure it. This way, if it's ever missing in the mail accidentally, then you stand to make a little bit of money from it.
Sure.
Okay, now, I've had so many things missing through the mail. This is the only way I really, truly get things where I want them to go. I figure if they're going to end up missing, I might as well make a little living at it. Now, I'm going to give you I'll give you an address, and the address is John Rhodes, Rhodes,
right,
and that's Post Office Box 50381, Henderson, that's Henderson, Nevada, 89016-0381. Now, I also have a voicemail system set up.
Do it again, though.
Okay. It's John Rhodes.
Right.
Post Office Box 50381, Henderson, Nevada, 89016-0381. And I have a voicemail also, which, if you don't mind, in case anybody needs to or would like to receive a package of information regarding this research and other related research, if they do a money order or check for $10 and send it to me, I'll get them off a comprehensive package. And if you'd like, go ahead and send it to that address. My voicemail, in case you want to notify me of anything or need some further information like the address again, is area code 702-391-3335.
Okay.
That's 702-391-3335. And one other thing I have available in case people are interested in is I've done some psychoacoustic and psycho work. I've done some work with sound, and I've been able to create a subliminal self-hypnosis tape for abductees. And the reason I did this is because so many people are feeling like they've somehow been touched, and they don't have the money to go spend $90 an hour.
That's right.
To go to a psychiatrist to get hypnosis. So I've used some very ancient metaphysical tones that correspond with the chakra, and I've gotten together with a very famous hypnotist out here in Las Vegas by the name of Helen Balcom.
Right.
And we designed this self-hypnosis tape that teaches people how to get themselves into the self-hypnotic state, as well as empower them through their experiences instead of allowing them to sit in the victimization role, and recall some of these events if they so choose.
All right. If it's not...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, if it's not $90 an hour, how much is it?
It's $10, and once you buy it, I just welcome you until I otherwise tell you to go ahead and copy it, and please hand it out to your friends.
That's
because part of my job here, not only am I a spokesman for a group of people who have spent their lives working on subjects such as this, but my job here right now is to help people and empower people. And that's one of the reasons I also sometimes, when I go out and give lectures, I'll spend an extra day, take a handful of people, and teach them to investigate for themselves. Because we all need to put at least a little bit of work into it. And the more people who put work into it and forward the information to someone like myself, which is like a pivot point, then the more ability we have to be able to get a clearer perception on what's going on.
All right, glad you got all that out, and we'll be back to John Rhodes in just one moment. Here's something that's... In other words, this prisoner, instead of the normal, has seen a human who has small holes on the side of the head near the top of the ear and in slightly toward the temple. I have exactly what I describe on both sides of my head and have yet to see this on any other human being. If your guest has no such experience, can you refer me to somebody you might know? Barbara in Santa Barbara. No, I certainly can't, John. Have you ever heard of such a thing?
I hesitate to answer simply because it hits so close to home. This last year, our 5-year-old girl had recently awoken one morning and was worrying about her ears and scratching at them, and I looked inside, and just on the inside of the ear, but still within the actual outside fleshy piece against the temple, was a perfectly circular cored-out hole. Now, that in itself would not be so remarkable if it weren't for the fact that when I looked in the opposite ear, 180 degrees around, on her other side of her head, was another perfectly cylindrical hole, right in the exact same location. So, yes, I haven't heard very many other people talk about it, but it's really strange that that your caller should happen to ask that question.
What?
I mean, that's really odd.
Yeah, okay. What would you say to her? I mean,
all I could say is that...
Do you want her to contact you?
Well, yeah. I mean, she's more than welcome to contact me, as well as I invite anybody out there whatsoever who may have information regarding any experiences or any other information regarding the reptilians or reptiles or any sort of a contact or abduction to contact me and send me a copy of the information. I'd really appreciate it. That way it would enable me to be able to get a little better perspective on what's going on.
Here's a quick, crazy question, because we're about at the top of the hour. A lot of people, when they were abducted, some have actually reported underground experiences. Others have reported that they are in the interior of something. Now, I wonder if it could be, John, that in many times they are not in a craft at all, but in some sort of underground structure.
Excellent point. That's an excellent point. And I think the best thing we could do is try and get to that at the top, after the top of the hour, because that's an area in all itself. I can tell you that in the very few experiences that I personally have had that I can consciously remember was one in particular in which I was sitting in a craft that was like the interior of a Hopi Indian or Pueblo Indian kiva.
All right, hold that thought. We'll be right back to you. I want to remind everybody our bulletin board service is up with
the modern religion. But the one we can most identify with is the Christian religion for the majority of people.
That's right.
And I will only say this, is that all you have to do is look at the reptilian in the Garden of Eden, and when he had interfered originally with the overall plans, God, Jehovah, or whatever, came down and said, you haven't behaved like I've told you, you've interfered. Now get thee underground. I will cast thee underground, and man's heel shall be upon your forehead, and you shall be at man's heel. In other words, they were cast underground. There are many ancient religions that talk about these reptilians being underground. Only one of them is the Hopi religion, where they talk about their ancestors not being human, but being snakes or reptilians. And they call them the snake people. And like we're coming full circle now from like the beginning of the show, the ant people and the snake people. They believe, according to their legends, that at the end of each great cycle, when these devastations happen, they're taken underground to safety by the ant people. And this area that they lived in was the underworld. And they finally came up after the devastation through a hole in the ceiling of this great underground cave or this underworld called the Sipap Puni. Nobody has ever known where the Sipap Puni is. And they've always thought of it as legend and myth.
In that case, John, this question may answer itself. It's from John up in Seattle, Washington. Given their underground status as of now, how did they survive the catastrophe that wiped out all other higher reptile life forms millions of years ago And that kind of answers itself, I guess.
Right. If there's something happening on the surface, the immediate response is to try and go underground, not only with our own government like they're doing now, but it's shown back in very medieval pictures, and it's even reported back in the times like the Velikovskian, series of when they said that the great, the stars fell from heaven and the great earthquake. There's many depictions of people running for caves. If there was a more highly evolved form of intelligence in the age of the dinosaur, then perhaps their immediate instinct was to run for cover as well.
Mm-hmm.
When you start going underground, there are natural aquifers of fresh water traveling in great rivers in some cases. When this happens, it releases highly charged positive ions into the air, as well as releases a high content of oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
So you can live down in these areas. There's radium that lines the walls of some of these caves, which gives off a constant light. And there's also many other minerals within the earth itself that you could actually grow from. When this underground mythological Indian place, the Sipatpuni, was said to be somewhere in the Four Corners area, they supposed, there was an article written by the Arizona Gazette, the Phoenix Gazette, back in 1909, where it talks about a man by the name of Kincaid traveling down the Colorado River on a skiff, and he had come across an underground city that was built into the walls of the Grand Canyon that was big enough for 50,000 people to live in.
Really?
And when I initially read this article, I started a 4-year search to see if this could possibly be. What I've discovered is that in many outlying areas of where they would have carried that same article, even in the Yuma Examiner where this, he apparently was, the microfilm is all there for every day except those 2 days that it was printed. So there's suspicion by omission.
John, this is also interesting because there have been reports, rumors, myths, whatever you want to call it, some of them fairly substantial, that there's something going on in the Grand Canyon, that some area of it has been cordoned off to the public. Nobody's allowed to go near it. Nobody knows what it is. Have you heard those reports?
Well, they justify it by saying it's just dangerous. However, I can tell you that, honestly, after 4 years of research, I have finally located that exact same location where Kincaid had walked into the cave and found the Egyptian mummies, the metal that nobody could explain where it came from, the hieroglyphics that looked like they were from central Yucatan but not, and the cat's eyes. And then, like I said, they said that there was enough room for 50,000 people to live in. But the question is this, is that if there were, in fact, 50,000 people in the Grand Canyon, there is no evidence on the surface of that area that 50,000 people ever walked that area.
Indeed.
So where in the world did they go? Now, I've recently been in touch with sightings regarding this, and we've talked about doing something on it, and other people off on the West Coast, because when I finally released the full impact of my discovery of this location, it has such implications to it that it has to be done very gingerly, especially when I carry a lot of respect for the Hopi Indians. And this being their mythological place of the emergence from the underworld, it needs to be treated very delicately. And we're currently in negotiations with certain elements on the West Coast to try and get that out on the most widely spread way that we can.
Do you remember the old movie Journey to the Center of the Earth? I'm sure you do.
Wasn't that great?
Yes. Who is to know, but could there be portals somewhere on the Earth? Do you believe there are?
Yes.
That would lead, if not to the center of the Earth, very, very deeply into the Earth?
Absolutely. I believe that the Earth is like a human body in a way, that it has veins and arteries. And those veins and arteries are natural and unnatural caverns and tunnel systems. And there probably are some areas of the Earth that are more, highly concentrated with tunnel systems, such as the Four Corners Southwest area, Central America, and the Andes area of Chile and down south in South America. One of the greatest reptilians, you've heard these winged reptilians we hear about.
Yes.
The Draco, and then the non-winged. Well, one of the greatest winged reptilian religious symbols there has ever been, or deities, is that of Quetzalcoatl. and he was a very benevolent being that lived down in the Yucatan area and Mexico. And you're going to love this. This has got to do with a lot of my research. I know you're just probably going to jump off your seat. But revelations, when they talk about revelations, it means to reveal what was once hidden.
Yes.
And during these times, these things will be revealed, as will the reptilian life forms. Quetzalcoatl was the being that lived between 600 and 900 A.D. down in Mexico, and also the upper Yucatan. And like I said, he was very benevolent. He went into an area where the Aztecs were ripping hearts out of people, and he said, no, no, no. He said, just put some herbs up on the altar. And he taught them science. He was the one that the Mayans and the Aztecs attribute to teaching them the Mayan calendar. And we know the scientific, significance of that.
Oh, yes.
The astronomical calendar. But then also, there are many relations between him and what we know of as the Christ. As a matter of fact, some people, like the Mormons of today's religions, believe that Quetzalcoatl was Christ reincarnate because he was just so benevolent in a very violent area. Anyway, through my research, I've realized through studying ancient archaeology and architecture, like in the Art and Architecture of Ancient America by George Kubler, he says that the most ancient of all archaeological ruins that are circular in formation are the result of the presence of the cult of Quetzalcoatl. That being, Quetzalcoatl means the feathered serpent, the being of the feathered serpent.
Do you connect all this, John, to the incredible sightings going on in Mexico? And I might add, ongoing in Mexico. Hundreds of thousands of people are seen.
Absolutely. I have plans on going down to the First International UFO Congress in Mexico City in August and having the opportunity to talk down there regarding this, because I truly do believe that Mexico City is going to be the primary point of contact. Because if the Mexican people have already started to be conditioned to the more prominent presence there of these craft, and information outside the United States, if it's real close to us, we have an ability to control it, especially since the governments are so close now with all the monies being passed back and forth and deals being made. But also it's easier to control the information if at first the people don't react properly or as expected. And when they do have this initial contact, if they react unexpectedly, then they can stop the information flow right away. As you've seen, they've been doing all along.
Well, they have. You're right. It's interesting, though. From those I've talked to who have been to Mexico and have investigated, they have found the Mexican people are actually beginning to get, I'm not going to say nonchalant, but they're beginning to be accustomed to seeing these things almost all the time.
Absolutely. And
so that process is ongoing.
Oh yeah, and if they land there first, when finally they start reacting properly, or so that when we are finally able to see that they have been there and we don't see people running through the streets, then it'll help us react a little bit more calmly to the acceptance of their arrival. But also remember that Mexico City sits atop an ancient city of Mexico called Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan was the initial city created by the Aztecs. And, of course, the ancient god of the Aztecs was Quetzalcoatl. Now, when Quetzalcoatl was done, this winged serpent being was done with all his divine work down there, he said, when he left, I will return one day and I will redeem my people, which is exactly the same promise as you've heard other religious deities throughout all Earth say.
Of course.
Right?
Yes.
So,
But I believe all religions must, as a basic tenet, have a past history and a future promise.
Right. Absolutely. For us to have hope.
Indeed. John, hold on just one moment. We'll be right back to you. Okay. John, I'm telling you, I've got so many faxes here, I could never get to them all. Here is one that says, reptilian experience by a 10-year-old. The following abduction experience by my 10-year-old son had grays showing my son reptilians. Now, there's much too much. This is from Maui, Hawaii, and there's much too much for me to go into here. But with all of this contact and all of this interest, John, I'm going to ask that you again please give out the telephone number and address, would you?
Absolutely. I welcome anybody to send material to me and or just send that $10, and I'll money order a check, and I'll send them a package of material. And the address is John Rhodes, that's RHODES, Post Office Box 50381, Henderson, Nevada 89016-0381. And in case you didn't get the address, you can call the voicemail system. It has the address on it again for you, which is 702-391-3335. And just to let everybody know, I'm not one of these researchers out there that's untouchable or that you can't talk to. I'm more than welcome people to get me information or to share their experiences with me if they feel that there's something that they can contribute to expanding my idea of what's going on. And time allowing, I'll try and get back in touch with you.
All right.
And then, of course, we have the tape that's $10, and then just add $2 in shipping and handling in there if you want to start finding out for yourself and you'd rather keep that experience a little more quiet.
All right.
That self-hypnosis tape.
All right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Rhodes. Hi.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Hi.
Recently, about a year or so ago, in Northern California, extremely Northern California.
Where are you, sir?
I am calling from the Ozarks.
Okay.
But in extreme Northern California, actually Fort Smith area, there was a lot of land, off-road land, rugged terrain, that was made off limits to the public. And for one reason or another, I think one government agency made it off limits to protect another one for whatever they were doing. And the reason for this is what appeared to be forest rangers were heavily armed with shoulder-strap machine guns. Now, it made no sense at all, and I know they weren't looking for marijuana.
Well, that's not the reason to cordon it off. That is the amount of security to accomplish it. What do you think they were cordoning off?
I have no idea, but I know that they were not they were keeping it close under taps. Well, I mean, why in the world would they have shoulder-strap machine guns in the first place? And this, like I said, in extreme Northern California, up near the Oregon border.
All right. Well, I've got a fax here also, John, about Mount Shasta. There are a lot of stories about Mount Shasta.
Yes.
And are you familiar with the term Lemurians?
Yes, I am.
Is this a group who supposedly lives in or under Mount Shasta?
Well, from what I've been able to discover through my research and through the research of other people like Cherry Hinkle and Tal and the other names I mentioned before, that appears that Mount Shasta is a shared facility, like a neutral base, like almost a Switzerland, for many different races and beings. And that's why there's such a variety of different reports coming out of there of various different-looking beings. As far as Lemuria and Mu and Atlantis, I do believe that, yes, I do believe that there were past continents and otherwise past civilizations that were destroyed through their own cataclysms, and some of them did escape through the tunnel systems. These tunnel systems crisscross the world, not just here.
All right, fascinating. Hold on, John. Remember to get a copy of this program, which I can understand you might want. Call 1-800-917-4278. 1-800-917-4278.
Kingdom of Nye. You're hearing Dreamland with Art Bell. To participate in the program, call toll-free 1-800-618-8255. 1-800-618-8255. First-time callers, area code 702-727-1222. Or the wildcard line at 702-727-1295. This is the CBC Radio Network.
Boy, it sure is. A lot of interest around what John Rhodes is discussing, the human-reptilian connection. Underground tunnels, bases, perhaps even civilizations. Back to it in a moment. Anybody who knows anything about health, those who actually study it, know the benefit of vitamin C. UCLA scientists found that vitamin C and the antioxidant value in it can help avoid cancer, strokes, heart attacks, and increase life expectancy an average of 5 years now. That's a lot of time. There are people paying $100,000 to get liver transplants that on average will give them 5 years more time. So what's it worth? What's it worth to feel better? Well, antioxidants fight free radicals. Basically, they make you old. They cause you to age faster, develop stiff joints, premature wrinkling, even degenerative disease. All that comes with getting older. Those are free radicals. Antioxidants clobber free radicals. Now, I know it's a strange name, but pycnogenol, pycnogenols are antioxidants, strong ones. They work. Nick Jeromish of Wallace, North Carolina said, quote, "Several doctors wanted me to have open heart surgery, but after taking pycnogenols, the pain has disappeared in my chest and my hands and my feet are warm again. I can walk about 2 miles without getting out of breath, and the brown spots on my hands and forehead are clearing up. I feel so much better," end quote. To order pycnogenols, this food supplement I'm taking, call Natural Health at 1-800-856-1119. That's 1-800-856-1119. Now listen, these are the best. 95% pure grapeseed extract, purest on the market. 1-800-856-1119. Back now to John Rhodes. John, a lot of people want to talk to you, so let me take a couple of calls very quickly.
Great, okay.
All the way out to Maui, Hawaii, you're on the air with John Rhodes. How are you doing?
Hi, John. Thank you very much for the excellent information. And, Art, thanks for a great program. I just wanted to mention that initially when I was listening to your show tonight, I was my guard was up and I started resisting the potential of having any connection with reptiles. But then I remembered an experience that my 10-year-old son had just a couple years ago, and I'll quote him on it. He, first of all, had experienced an alien abduction experience that described grays. Entities with oval dark eyes, did not blink, etc. But what it is important is these entities showed Joshua, quote, bad aliens that had dark skin with many small bumps on them like a reptile. And the key point is the aliens said they did not fight them with weapons or try to destroy them, but they kept them at bay with their minds. My question is, has there been any other reports that reptilians are hostile, or are they more benevolent and friendly toward the human race?
All right.
Well, I believe that there are those that are benevolent, and I think there are those that are evil. It is the common law of nature, and it cannot be disregarded, that there's the positive and negative polarity of absolutely everything. Even an atom has a positive and negative pole to it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking about human nature as well as nature of a living life form, I think that we are able to fluctuate between the negative and the positive polarities of whether we want to be good or evil as a matter of free will. Just as there are some people who may live in foreign countries under a crazy dictator who support perhaps, public executions of large masses of people, there are those beings like Mother Teresa. And I think you bring up a very good point, and that point is this great deceit that we come into that everybody's worried about, is that we have to look within ourselves and know within ourselves exactly who or what we're looking at. They say, there's an old saying, is know thee by thy deeds. Know somebody by what they're doing, not by what they're saying or what they look like.
Well, it sounds like that man should personally communicate with you.
Oh yeah, I openly invite you to. I think there's a lot to learn between the two of us.
All right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Rhodes. Where are you calling from, please?
Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Yes, sir.
I've studied reptiles for many years, and one of the things about reptiles that's rather interesting is that the male's genitalia are located in most species, on both sides of the tail. There are two, and they have very unique shapes in such a manner that they will uniquely fit the female of that species and no other. There was a comment earlier about rape of abductees, and it seems to me that this would be one interesting way to try to validate those.
Well, that's an interesting point you're bringing up. I don't know the particulars of what you're talking about as regards to the sexual genitalia of the reptile as opposed to the human being. That's something that I haven't really looked into, so I couldn't give you an informative opinion on that.
Well, if for no other reason that most reptiles have two, that ought to be an interesting cross-check, and the fact that these things are very oddly shaped, very, very oddly shaped.
And probably quite popular.
They would probably be very painful, as a matter of fact.
Well, I know that there are the reports of the forced rapes, and I'm not sure if there are different reptilians as far as different physical species of them. But then again, there's human differences of our own species, like you have the pygmy, and then you have the tall people of Africa, and then you have the albinos. So I'm not willing to say at this time as to whether they are just of one type.
All right, here's a fact for you. Yes, the primitive brain positioned on top of the human spinal cord has long been referred to as the reptilian brain by academics. This information is not news. The primitive human brain, often referred to as the reptilian brain, performs the usual and ordinary biological functions which are common with the reptile and higher vertebrates: breath, hunger, thirst, excretion, sex, and so forth. Would your guest not agree the great developmental divide between the reptile and the higher vertebrates is the affection of the parent for the young? The reptile and lower animal classes abandon the egg or young upon discharge. The reptile does not protect, feed, or care for its young. The higher vertebrates, beyond and above reptilian biological divide, care for the young in varying degrees.
God, I couldn't have said it better myself. And that fax, the person that sent that fax in is right on target. This possibly explains the large amount of abductions with people where they're being made to hold the children. Because if it's in fact the case that they are looking at our affection for children, as they apparently are doing, through abductions where these ladies are made to hold the babies.
Yes, oh yes.
And then they sit back and watch, and they're really amazed at it, and they're just taking in everything they can.
I've heard many stories.
This would make total sense. It really would.
It really would.
And we've got to remember that the reptiles, primarily people think of them as giving birth to an egg. Well, there's the reptile like the adder, the snake that's the adder, that actually gives birth to its young without the egg. So, I think that, whoever sent that fax in, please get in touch with me.
Well, the person sending the fax is named Don from Redmond, Washington, so be so notified, Don. He'd like to hear from you. On the wild card line, you're on the air with John Rhodes.
Yes, this is Michael in Wichita, Kansas.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Michael.
And I have like to hear your comment about blackouts in the coast, both coasts, and if that has anything to do with Project HAARP that I've heard related to on your show before.
Okay, I would answer that. I think not. I don't know that for sure, but I don't think the blackouts relate to HAARP. They occurred actually prior to HAARP's beginning its activity, so I will leave that one there. First-time caller line, you're on the air with John Rhodes. Hi.
Hi, Art. Congratulations for a great show. This is New Orleans calling.
New Orleans, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Art, several weeks ago you had a UFO guest on that talked about UFOs, and he brought up a particular incident where the United States military had surrounded a downed craft, went on board, discovered that the occupants were reptilian-type occupants on board, and when apparently in a alcove of this spaceship discovered human remains, human bones, and I was wondering if your guest had any knowledge of that incident or any similar incidences.
John?
Well, I don't have any knowledge of that particular incident. As far as reports of them having the remains of human beings on board, it's quite possible. I wouldn't say that they were the cause of that person's demise, but they could have been.
All right, I'm going to ask you about two. I'm going to give you two weird questions. You can ignore them if you like. We mentioned Journey to the Center of the Earth earlier. If you had an opportunity, John, to travel very, very deeply into the Earth, if you found a porthole that would take you there, would you go?
Yes. I would not go without deep prayer beforehand.
But you would go?
Yes.
The next question involves an Associated Press story a number of years ago that has always stuck with me. Somewhere in Scandinavia, I can't recall where it was, they drilled what they thought to be the deepest hole ever drilled by man. And maybe you can update me. They lowered microphones, sound microphones, into this hole. And they heard sounds of human agony and screaming and torture. Thousands of voices, or what appeared to be that. And they actually ran that on the Associated Press. Now, I remember the story and held it in my hand off the wire and talked about it. It was really weird. And then you never heard anything more about it. How deeply have we ever gone into the Earth? Do you know?
Well, I do know that according to RAND Corporation documents and the documents from DARPA and such agencies, they've said that there have been studies to actually build underground bases as far as 8,000 feet underground. Now, that's quite a bit distance.
It sure is.
It appears from what I've been able to see that as far as tectonic plate shift and earthquakes, most earthquakes happen on a fairly shallow level. And there is a theory out that the deeper you go, it is safer for you to be. And that if anything did shift over you with the current technology, with the nuclear boring, tunnel boring machines that they have, that you could just drill your way out. As far as the screams and everything.
Had you ever heard that report?
Yeah, I'd heard the report. I mean, did they drill through the ceiling of hell?
Well, that's the obvious implication.
Sure. Right? And it could be maybe that everybody was imagining that that's what they were going to do. So, and that's just what they heard. Maybe it was a collective, hypnosis of some sort.
Maybe it was. The only thing about it was they claimed they had it on audio tape.
Well, I haven't heard it.
And I would love to. John,
yeah, I would
we'll
too.
have you back on Dreamland again. And B, I might think about having you on one Friday night, Saturday morning, if you have the time on the regular syndicated program.
That's the marathon program you have?
You call it the marathon program.
It's great.
I guess, 5 hours a night, that's right.
Yeah, it's great.
It is great. It's a lot of fun. And if you ever do you ever stay up late?
Well, I try not to, but I tend to be up at many times 2, 3 in the morning at my computer doing my research and writing.
I understand.
So I do enjoy your shows.
Okay, well then maybe one night we'll plan ahead, and on a Friday night, Saturday morning, you can go get a nap on Friday, and we'll do a show.
I think that could be possible.
It is fascinating, John, because of I think there's a natural human curiosity about what is below us. We almost know more about what is above us at this point than what is below us, don't we?
Yes, and it's been very difficult for researchers such as Tal and Cherry Hinkle and Bill Hamilton and the others to be able to put this word out about we have to start looking underneath our feet. I think the majority of the reason why it's been so hard to have other researchers in the field take it seriously as it should be taken is, number one, with the advent of video cameras, it's easy for us to start getting hooked on looking above our heads because it's just right there for us at times.
Sure.
And when it's underground, we really don't have anywhere to go with that other than to look at the logic and listen to the information that's being provided. Many of these installations and natural cavern systems are very inaccessible. The one, for example, in the Grand Canyon that I discovered is extremely dangerous to try and get to. And I wouldn't suggest that anybody, should they find something like that, just go alone.
Don't try this.
Absolutely not.
All right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with John Rhodes. Hi.
Yes, I'm calling from St. Louis.
St. Louis, yes, sir.
Yes, I have a friend of mine. I read a book once about underground caverns and stuff, and this one guy I was talking to here at work, he grew up in an area, I believe it's Creve Coeur, but there's a lot of caves out in that area, and he said that twice he's seen some odd-looking creatures out there around these particular caves, and he's offered many times to take me out there to the area where it was at. But he says he knows exactly where they were coming from. And he said the one night that he got the best look at them, he said that he had pulled off the side of the road in his car, because he was changing a flat tire.
Right.
And he said that with his brake lights, he's seen these two creatures. He said they were about 4 foot tall or something like that. He said they ran across one side of the road. He said they were like in this farmer's field. And he said they ran in like a kind of hobbling fashion. And he said they jumped, across the road over to these weeds on the other side toward the caves. And he said, with the brake lights, he could see them, And he said that one of them stuck his head up through the weeds, looking at him. And he said it was only like 40 feet away. And he said it had a large head and had large black eyes. So he said he jumped up and took off running, and left the car there,
I think I would, too.
Yeah, have the tow truck driver go get it.
That's right. That's right.
But he's offered many times to take me, to the area where he said they're at. And also, I know another guy.
Sounds like you have not yet taken him up on that.
No, I didn't.
All right. Well, I don't blame you, sir. We don't have much time. We've got to run. John, given an opportunity to actually be abducted by some of the creatures that you suspect exist, or not be abducted, would you be curious enough to say, okay, take me, I'm out of here? Or would you be more tempted to run like hell?
I think it's one thing talking about an alien species. It's another thing looking at one eye to eye.
You betcha.
I mean, a lot of us don't understand that. We can give lip service to, oh, yeah, well, we're ready, you were ready, I'm ready, but when one's sitting there close enough for you to feel its breath upon your forehead because of its size.
I agree.
And its muscular structure is so much more, much more profound than you could ever imagine. You feel so small and out of control that the first thing that goes is your knees. So, no, I wouldn't say that I'd be open for just anybody. I still feel that that's a violation. However, I believe that if we call upon our divine being within us during that time of an abduction, we can actually command in the name of that power within us for it to stop. I would not say that we're all victims. I think that many people, starting at childhood, give permission initially to be abducted because they have no fear and they have this great wonderment. And
all right.
Children do.
Look, we're out of time. There's never enough time. Give out your address and phone number one more time.
Okay. If you'd like to receive a package of information concerning this, send $10, money order or check. And if you'd like to receive the self-hypnosis cassette for abductees, the same amount, please add $2 additional for shipping and handling to John Rhodes, that's R-H-O-D-E-S, Post Office Box 50381, Henderson, Nevada, 89016-0381. And if you need that address again, just call the voicemail. That's area code 702-391-3335. And I'd like to take this opportunity to really thank you very much for all the great work that you've been doing through all the years. You really have stepped out on a limb when you first started coming out with this information, Art, and you've actually created waves that have felt repercussions not only locally, nationally, and internationally, but I'm sure dimensionally as well.
John,
you will be remembered.
Thank you. I live on limbs. John Rhodes, we'll have you back. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Art.
Take care. Remember, our bulletin board number is area code 702-727-1709. To get a tape of this or any other program, call 1-800-917-4200. 78 from the high desert adjacent to Dreamland. Good night.
This has been Dreamland, a program dedicated to an examination of areas in the human experience not easily nor neatly put in a box. Things seen at the edge of vision, awakening a part of the mind as yet not mapped. Yet things every bit as real as the air we breathe